David, let me start off with you, and this is the elephant in the room, right? How does the second Trump presidency play out when it comes to reaching or being a hindrance to COP29's goals?
Morning, Heidi. Well, as we heard there, a range of opinions from delegates at COP29 in Baku. And, a lot of the detail of exactly what a second Trump presidency will mean, we're still waiting for a lot of that. But we know the general direction in some important areas. Internationally, when it comes to ambitions to cut emissions, to get on a path to net zero by mid-century, what we know is that Trump isn't going to be a supporter of accelerated effort. Last time around, he withdrew the US from the Paris Agreement, the flagship global effort to limit temperature rises. He's already signaled he'll do that again and could even take it a step further and see the US disengage with the process by which countries make pledges to cut their emissions. It's a really critical time for that issue. Countries are right now in the process of making new pledges of accelerating their ambition. They're due to lodge those plans over the next coming months and into next year. If the US disengages, it's not going to be positive for that trajectory.
Ali, how do we see Trump's return impact the Asia Pacific in particular? Do we anticipate the energy transition in the region could slow down?
Not necessarily. There's a limited areas where U.S. federal policies will impact the pace of energy transition in Asia Pacific. There is one clear area, and that's the Indonesia Just Energy Transition Partnership. This $20 billion climate finance package that was announced just about 2 years ago when Indonesia was hosting the G20. Half of that $20 pledge comes from the International Partners Group, which is primarily G7 members, along with a few Western European nations. In the case of the Indonesia JETP, the IPG side is co-led by the US and Japan. In particular, the US Treasury under the Biden administration has played a significant role around negotiations around this deal. Now, the deal was announced 2 years ago. It took them a long time to actually come up with a plan around what this $20 billion would be invested on. In the end, after much delay, Indonesia published its own version of what they would like to focus on last year, just November 2023. But since then, we haven't actually seen any actual investment be made into the priorities of that deal. Now, between now and January 20th, 2025, when the new administration comes in, if we don't see any money flows, then it's likely that we're not going to see the U.S. continue to support the deal. And without U.S. support, it'd be very hard to see the Indonesia JETP continue going forward. Beyond that, of course, under a hypothetical Trump administration expanding oil and gas production, we might see a higher volume of LNG coming to the Asia-Pacific region. There might be also lower prices. This might actually help accelerate transition in some countries, but we have to still see what the administration does when it comes into power in January.
David, time is certainly flying. In 5 years' time, it's going to be 2030. Also, the first major checkpoint on climate action is in 2030. So how far have we come and what still needs to be done?
Well, quite. We're rapidly getting towards that date. A whole raft of governments, big businesses, Wall Street, they've all set targets for climate action that they want to achieve by 2030. The point of that, the principle, is to be on track to hit that net zero goal by mid-century. Bloomberg Green has conducted an analysis published yesterday that's available on the terminal and on Bloomberg.com of a whole sweep of industries and the progress they're making to those targets. And look, the bottom line is the picture isn't great. Where there is progress, areas like renewable energy, like EVs, that progress still isn't fast enough to meet some of those ambitions and to hit those targets. In other sectors, in other segments, deforestation is a great example. Progress is going in the wrong direction. In deforestation specifically, we saw, I think, about 6.4 million hectares of forest lost last year, more than 2022, and decisively in the wrong direction, about 45% higher than where we need to be. So, the progress wasn't going in the right direction. Factor in a potential absence of US leadership, and the outlook looks even more pessimistic.
Such an uplifting conversation, guys. Ali, on your end, do you have expectations for progress being made this time?
So hopefully I can conclude on a slightly more optimistic note. Before the election results, our expectations for COP29 around the 9 key areas of importance this time around was 6 out of 10. We've slightly lowered that number now since the election results to 5 out of 10. The areas where progress is going to be very difficult now with the U.S. election results are one around the next round of the nationally determined contributions. So these are the targets that the countries set for themselves. By next year, countries have to set their 2035 targets and ideally ensure that these targets are aligned with the 1.5 degrees goal. Now, both of these are going to be very challenging now with absence of U.S. leadership, as David already pointed out. The other area that's going to be quite challenging is the new climate finance goal. Way back in 2009 in Copenhagen, there was a $100 billion target pledged by developed economies for climate finance for developing economies. The goal of that target was to meet it by $100 billion annually by 2020. They ended up meeting it a few years later. Now they need to come up with a new target, and with U.S. absence, it'd be very hard to actually get to the range of targets that countries are talking about. Some are arguing for targets of over $1 trillion per year. This is going to be very difficult to agree on.